my shit.
I don't give a niggas is in this motherfucker. I don't give a where my niggas at?
Biggie didn't work with everyone. In fact, there were several artists he flat out refused to work with. And the reasons behind those decisions run deeper, darker, and more complicated than anyone ever realized. He knew that jealousy and envy came with fame.
And jealousy and envy is something that comes with the territory.
Before his life was cut tragically short, Biggie had already drawn his lines in the sand, choosing exactly who he would stand beside and who he wouldn't. And today, we're unpacking the 8 artists Biggie refused to work with, and the truth behind each decision. First on the list is Tupac. The number one name on this list isn't surprising, but the real story behind it still hurts. Because before the world turned them into symbols of a war, Tupac and Biggie were something much deeper. They weren't enemies. They weren't rivals. They were brothers, in a way hip-hop doesn't create anymore.
Yeah, I'm scared to freestyle. I'm scared to do some freestyle.
Long before the cameras, long before the headlines, long before the tension, Pac and Big were laughing together, recording together, performing together, and building a friendship grounded in trust, talent, and a raw, unfiltered love for the art.
Join out my nigga be hot to the Jeep beside me.
Pac saw something special in Biggie early. He recognized his hunger, his voice, his presence, and he pushed to help him shine. He invited Big on stage. He shared meals with him. He kept him close like family. And in a gesture that speaks louder than any lyric ever could, Pac even asked Biggie to join Thug Life. It wasn't a casual offer. It wasn't just business. It was an invitation into his inner circle, a commitment of loyalty, a brotherhood built on respect. Big turned the offer down, not out of disrespect, but because he believed Puff had a vision for him at Bad Boy, and Pac understood. At that moment, nothing broke. But everything changed later. November 1994, Quad Studios, the night that rewrote hip-hop history. Pac showed up expecting to record, expecting another normal moment in the whirlwind of his career. But instead of music, he walked into gunfire. He left the building with bullets in his body.
He ordered him to the floor. Tupac resisted. He was shot numerous times.
And in that chaos, a belief formed. A belief that someone connected to Biggie or Puff had known something about the attack before it happened. Big denied it. Puff denied it. Everyone at Bad Boy denied it. But Pac's trust had already shattered. Once the seed of betrayal was planted, nothing could stop it from growing. From that moment on, every silence, every rumor, every headline felt like confirmation. The friendship evaporated. The warmth turned cold. The brotherhood collapsed under pressure neither man was ready for. Then came the music. Pac unleashed tracks that burned with anger. Hit 'em Up, Against All Odds, and interviews where the pain spilled out raw. Big never released a direct response, but he didn't have to. The tension was already enough to split the entire industry in two.
You know what I'm saying? Plain and simple. When we see each other, we gonna see each other. Until then, I'm gonna make good music and he gonna make whatever he make.
Fans chose sides. Labels chose sides. The media poured gasoline on every spark. The East Coast and West Coast weren't just regions anymore. They were battlegrounds. For Biggie, refusing to collaborate with Pac after that wasn't a choice. It was survival. The world had created a war neither man wanted, and anything they tried to do creatively would only feed the fire. So the music never came. The reconciliation never happened. The studio session that could have healed everything never took place. And now, all we're left with is the silence. The haunting silence of the songs we'll never hear, the paths that never crossed again, and a friendship that didn't just break, it exploded. Sliding into the second spot is Nas. Biggie and Nas were both young kings in the same city, rising at the exact same moment, carrying the same hunger, chasing the same crown. In the early 90s, New York wasn't just a city, it was a proving ground. And out of that pressure came two prodigies who reshaped rap in completely different ways. Nas had Illmatic, a project so poetic, so sharp, so spiritually rooted in Queensbridge that critics treated it like scripture. Biggie had Ready to Die, a cinematic masterpiece that painted Brooklyn with humor, vulnerability, fear, and ambition all at once. One sounded like a philosopher. The other sounded like a storyteller with a movie camera for a voice. They weren't rivals at first. They were reflections of each other's greatness. They admired each other deeply. They studied each other's work. They both understood that the other was the only person in New York operating on their level. That's why the talk of a collaboration made perfect sense. There was supposed to be a remix, a studio session, maybe even a long-term creative partnership. People around them whispered about the possibilities. A Nas Biggie record felt like destiny, the kind of artistic collision that could stop the city cold. But then the missed studio sessions happened. Nas didn't show up. Not once, not twice, multiple times. And in the world of 90s hip-hop, that wasn't a small thing. Studio time wasn't casual. It was sacred. If someone didn't show up, it meant something. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the pressure Nas carried as the chosen one. Maybe it was label politics. Maybe it was just life. But to Biggie, it landed like a message. And Big was the kind of person who listened closely to messages, especially the ones delivered without words. That's when the subliminals started to creep into the music. Nas declared, through lyrics and interviews, that there can only be one king. Biggie responded with one of the most studied bars in rap history. Your reign on the top was short like leprechauns. Fans spent years debating who those lines were aimed at, but the energy was too sharp, too pointed, too specific to ignore. A Cold War had begun. No yelling, no diss tracks, just quiet tension, quiet competition, quiet pride. And sometimes, quiet can be louder than anything else.
We just played it too cool to come and talk to each other, and I hate that memory.
People inside the industry claimed Puff didn't want Big working with Nas anyway. They said Puff wanted Bad Boy to stand alone as the heart of New York rap, that aligning with Nas blurred the lines of who truly ruled the city. Whether that rumor was real or exaggerated didn't matter. The effect was the same. The collaboration faded. The opportunity dissolved. Two young giants drifted into separate orbits, and that absence, that empty space where a collaboration should have existed, became one of hip-hop's most painful what-if moments. What if Nas had shown up? What if the remix had been recorded? What if New York's two greatest minds had joined forces, instead of circling around each other in silence? We'll never know, and maybe that's why the story still stings. Number 3 brings us to Jeru the Damaja. Jeru the Damaja wasn't built for the mainstream spotlight, and he didn't want to be. While other rappers chased radio hits, shiny suits, and million-dollar videos, Jeru stood firmly on the opposite side of the cultural line. He represented the underground, the gritty, philosophical, anti-commercial heart of New York hip-hop. His music didn't sparkle, it didn't glow, it didn't dance across the radio. It confronted, challenged, and questioned the direction the culture was heading. And in the mid-90s, when Bad Boy Records was rising like a glittering empire, Jeru's music cut right through that shine. His songs, Ya Playin' Yourself and One Day, became lightning rods. Jeru didn't mention Biggie by name, but he didn't need to. The imagery he attacked, champagne culture, glossy videos, flamboyant outfits, commercialized aesthetics, was the very foundation of Puff and Biggie's movement. Anyone paying attention knew exactly who the message was aimed at. And Biggie felt it instantly. Puff felt it even more. What Jeru framed as cultural criticism landed in the Bad Boy offices like a direct shot at their identity. This tension would have stayed under the surface if not for one man caught in the middle, DJ Premier. Premier produced Jeru. Premier produced Biggie. He respected both artists, both camps, both visions. But when Biggie walked into the studio to record Kick in the Door, Premier became the unwilling referee in a silent war. As Big delivered a line clearly aimed at Jeru, Premier stopped the tape. He looked at Big and warned him, told him exactly what that bar meant, exactly where it would land, exactly how deep it could cut. But Big didn't flinch. He doubled down. He insisted on keeping the line. He felt Jeru cross the line by undermining the very culture Big stood on. And then Puff walked in, and everything escalated. Puff wasn't amused. He wasn't diplomatic. He was furious. In that moment, he made it clear that Bad Boy wasn't just taking notes. They were ready to respond. His comment about coming after Jeru the Damaja too wasn't a joke. It was frustration, boiling over, the kind of industry pressure artists rarely speak about publicly. After that studio moment, the line between Biggie and Jeru hardened. A collaboration became impossible. Big didn't hate Jeru. He just refused to stand next to someone who publicly challenged the movement he was helping build. To Biggie, it was about respect. And once that respect was broken, the door closed forever. And that's why, to this day, Jeru the Damaja and the notorious B.I.G. never shared a track. Not even once. Number 4 is the Wu-Tang Clan.
Something happened where Biggie was going to get jumped by Wu-Tang. I remember hearing the story.
Yes.
I don't know. Break that story down,
Wu-Tang Clan and Biggie Smalls stood like two massive pillars on opposite ends of the New York rap universe. They weren't enemies. They weren't competitors in the traditional sense. They were simply two giants representing two completely different worlds. Wu-Tang brought gritty Shaolin energy, dusty basement beats, sword-swinging imagery, and a raw, unfiltered style that felt ancient and futuristic at the same time. They were underground philosophers with street discipline, turning Staten Island into a mythology of its own. Bad Boy, on the other hand, was a glowing skyscraper of sound. Luxurious, polished, stylish, radio-ready, their records shimmered with samples, crossover appeal, and a sense of celebration that made the whole world dance. And right in the heart of that movement stood Biggie, charismatic, cinematic, and untouchable. What makes this story surprising is how much Big admired Wu-Tang. He shouted them out in interviews. He respected their pen, their vision, their impact, and he wanted to bridge the gap between their worlds. Big actually pushed to get Method Man and Ghostface Killah on remixes for Hypnotize. It wasn't a rumor. Arza himself confirmed it. That's how deeply Big respected the craft Wu-Tang carried. But the collaboration never happened. Biggie had a problem with Wu-Tang.
Biggie had some problems with Wu-Tang.
Privately, insiders believed something else was going on. Puff wanted Bad Boy to stay distinct, unmistakable, and branded. A Biggie Wu-Tang crossover at that moment could blur lines, merge identities, and confuse the image each empire was carefully building. And Wu-Tang was protecting their world just as fiercely. So the idea faded quietly. Not out of anger, not out of tension, but out of mutual understanding. Two empires, two visions, two legendary forces, moving in parallel, respecting each other from a distance. And that's how one of New York's greatest what-ifs disappeared without a single verse recorded. Number 5 is The Roots. The Roots were one of the few groups Biggie openly championed. He praised them in magazines. He put Brooklyn onto their music. He loved their artistry long before live hip-hop bands became mainstream. Then came the What They Do music video. The Roots created a parody of typical commercial rap videos, champagne scenes, glamorous women, slow-motion party shots. It was meant to mock mainstream cliches, not specific people. But the problem was this. The video accidentally looked almost identical to Biggie's One More Chance video. The resemblance wasn't planned, it wasn't intentional, but Big didn't know that. When he saw the final cut, he felt disrespected. He felt mocked. He felt like he was being ridiculed by artists he had supported. The divide formed instantly. The Roots insisted it was an accident. Questlove even offered to write a full op-ed explaining the misunderstanding. But before he could fix things, tragedy struck. Biggie died the next day. The tension was never resolved, the misunderstanding was never cleared, and the possibility of a Biggie x Roots collaboration disappeared forever. Kool Moe Dee takes the 6th spot. Kool Moe Dee is more than an old-school rapper. He is a pillar of hip-hop's foundation, a lyrical architect whose influence ran through the veins of the culture long before the golden era took shape. He came from a time when rhyme patterns were carved with precision, when MCs sharpened their skills like weapons, when every word had intention, weight, and structure. To many of the pioneers, Kool Moe Dee wasn't just a rapper. He was the standard, a master technician, a guardian of what hip-hop was supposed to be. But as the 90s arrived, the sound of rap transformed dramatically. Storytelling became darker, the streets became louder. Commercial success began to reshape what labels wanted, and gangsta rap, with all its rawness, pain, and sometimes exaggerated bravado, took center stage. Kool Moe Dee didn't stay silent about this shift. He criticized the direction. He questioned the themes. He expressed concern that lyrical technique was being overshadowed by shock value, violence, and commercial appeal. He never called out Biggie by name, but everything he critiqued was deeply connected to Big's approach. Cinematic narratives, gritty realism, catchy hooks, and songs built for radio as much as for the block. For Biggie, this wasn't about ego. It was about respect. DJ Clark Kent once said, Big didn't appreciate people who talked down on his generation, not because he felt threatened, but because he believed every era deserved its own space, its own evolution, its own identity. Biggie respected the pioneers. He admired what they built. But he also understood that hip-hop wasn't supposed to stay in one place forever. It had to evolve, shift, and grow with the artists living through new realities. So when Kool Moe Dee's critiques echoed through interviews and his writing, Biggie took the message personally, not as an attack on his character, but as a dismissal of everything his era represented. He didn't want to collaborate with someone who didn't seem to embrace where the culture was heading. It wasn't animosity, it wasn't tension, it was a philosophical divide. Biggie believed the new generation wasn't disrespecting the past, They were building on it. Kool Moe Dee believed some of that new direction lacked discipline and purity, and those two worldviews, powerful as they were, simply couldn't occupy the same studio. That's why Biggie never moved toward a collaboration. Not out of anger, but out of principle. A bridge between their worlds could be built, but Biggie wasn't going to be the one to force it. Number 7 is Eazy-E. Eazy-E was a giant, not just an artist, but a force behind Ruthless Records and the rise of gangsta rap. But by the mid-90s, the West Coast was tangled in alliances, rivalries, and label conflicts that made every move dangerous. Death Row had its own empire. There were tensions between Suge Knight, Dr. Dre, and multiple camps. Biggie publicly said he avoided getting involved in political stuff. But politics and hip-hop at that time were unavoidable. According to industry whispers, Eazy-E wanted Big on a track around 95, but Puff allegedly shut the idea down. Not because of Eazy himself, but because of everything surrounding him. The alliances, the enemies, the implications. Big did very few West Coast collaborations after 1994. The only major one was Too Short, someone who stayed neutral in most coastal conflicts. Big wasn't afraid of Eazy, but he understood that one wrong feature could turn into a PR disaster, a misunderstood statement, or worse, fuel for an already burning war. And with the tension between Bad Boy and Death Row already boiling, the collaboration never had a chance. And finally, at number 8, we have AZ. AZ and Biggie admired each other's pen in a way that only true lyricists can. They lived in the same world of razor-sharp bars, smooth rhythms, crisp pocket control, and elegant storytelling. When AZ spoke, there was poetry. When Biggie rapped, there was cinema. Together, they could have created something timeless. And the wild part? They actually talked about it. AZ himself confirmed that the conversation happened. The respect was real, the interest was real, the possibility was real. So why didn't it happen? Why did two of Brooklyn's smoothest MCs never stand together on the same record? The answer lies in something subtle but powerful. AZ's voice, cadence, and delivery were incredibly close to Nas. Not identical, not copied, but undeniably similar in tone and texture. And during the mid-90s, Big and Nas weren't on openly hostile terms, but they were locked in a quiet, unspoken Cold War. Subliminals were being exchanged. Studio sessions were being missed. New York's crown was being contested. Every move both artists made carried political weight, even if they didn't intend it. So imagine Big appearing on a track with AZ. To outsiders, especially in a sensational media moment, it could look like Big aligning himself with Nas' style, or AZ taking a position in the rivalry. That wasn't the intention, but optics mattered, narratives mattered, and Puff was extremely protective of how Bad Boy was viewed in the culture. He didn't want confusion. He didn't want blurred lines. He didn't want anything that could reignite or complicate the tension with Nas. There's no proof Puff blocked the collaboration, but plenty of insiders believe he quietly discouraged it. Not because AZ lacked talent, but because the risk was too high. And so, despite mutual admiration and genuine artistic chemistry, the collaboration dissolved into one more what if the culture will never get back. A song between Biggie and AZ could have been a classic. Instead, it became a ghost of what might have been. So now the question comes to you. Which one of these 8 do you think would have given us the greatest collab of the decade? Would it have been Biggie and Nas trading bars? Biggie and Wu-Tang delivering a cinematic remix? Biggie and AZ weaving intricate rhymes? Or the impossible, heart-shaking dream of Biggie and Tupac repairing everything in the booth? Drop your thoughts below and let's talk about the collaborations we lost, the moments we never got back, and the paths hip-hop could have taken if just one of these stories ended differently. Because if this list reveals anything, it's that the legacy of the notorious B.I.G. isn't just in the tracks he recorded, it's also in the tracks he didn't.